Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. So today is a really big one. I'm going to be going over my top 10 games of all time, and this is a really big one. It was super difficult to come up with this list. I think I had a list of like 50 or 60 games, and I narrowed it down to like 16 and then finally down to 10, but it was super difficult, and I still feel like certain games on this list could probably shuffle, but these are right now, as of May 2022, these are my top 10 games of all time. These are games that are really personal to me. They mean a lot to me, and also, as I'll get into the video, I think a lot of them are games that I could just play over and over again. They're kind of desert island games as well. Like if I had to get rid of everything in my collection, these 10 games I feel like would give me tons of enjoyment for the rest of my life. So that was some of the criteria for coming up with this list. And yeah, just remember it's my personal list, and I really hope you guys enjoy this. So let's get started. So coming in at number 10 is Dot Hack Infection on the PS2. Now, I don't know if it really has to be Infection per se. I'd say it's really the core 4 games in that series: Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine. I have been playing these games since Infection came out on the PS2 back in 2002, I believe, and I'm still playing them. I was playing them earlier this year, I was playing them last year, and they just never really get old for me, even though the gameplay is pretty repetitive, I think, by today's standards, and the combat, I think, is fairly simple. I think what this game stands for and what this game communicates in terms of simulating an MMORPG in the early 2000s, it was super groundbreaking then. I think it's still groundbreaking now. I don't think anyone has ever done anything like this, and it's really quite incredible. You can play MMOs on private servers and classic servers, but nothing really can ever create the experience of being in that kind of, in that time period. And this game is like a total time capsule, just from the way that you're not only playing the game, but then you're getting like email notifications, and you go to the desktop on your computer and you load up the message board, and you're kind of cruising through the message board for rumors about rare items and weird things going on in the game, like special in-game events. You're emailing with your friends, you're searching for your friends to see if they're online, and they're not online. It's really remarkable, and I just think the feeling, like having the granular level of, you don't just load up the game and play, you log into your desktop, and then from within your desktop, you open several applications, and one of those applications is the game, the world, which is the MMO that you actually end up playing for the majority of your time in this game. I think it's really amazing. The graphics were pretty good at the time. I remember some effects like the hair and things like that being really good, but it definitely looks like an early PS2 game. But I think the art direction overall is fantastic. The music is incredible. It's one of the best soundtracks on the PlayStation 2, and I think it's a crime that not more people talk about this soundtrack. It's super good, and the story is also really fun and compelling and interesting, and there's a mystery to solve, and there are tons of characters that you can recruit. I think like 20 plus characters, maybe even more. It's so fun. It's so fun. I had to include it on my top 10 list. So that's Dot Hack Infection. Moving on to number 9, I feel like I've got a lot of kind of dark horse picks, and number 9 is Resident Evil Remake on the GameCube. And I know this is a really popular Resident Evil game, and for many people, it's their favorite Resident Evil game, or one that they consider the best in the series. I definitely feel that way. I think it's the best Resident Evil game, but it's one of my top 10 games of all time, not just because I'm a huge fan of the Resident Evil series and survival horror, but I feel like this was peak survival horror, and it was also peak pre-rendered backgrounds. And I think the pre-rendered backgrounds in this game, it was kind of like really the last time I saw them done this well. I'm sure there are more modern games that have kind of played with the idea, but the level of detail in the mansion and the attention to detail, like just little tiny things down to like a pencil on someone's desk, or like a bottle of pills in a bathroom, like above the mirror. There's so many little tiny details in this game, and it really makes it feel like, I think, you know, in combination with the fixed camera angles, like you're in this kind of diorama moving these characters around in this horror scenario. So I think from a sheer just art perspective, it's one of the most gorgeous games I've ever played or seen. I think the new version is really great and interesting. I think some of the upscaling that they did looks a little goofy, and I think it doesn't compare, in my opinion, to playing the original game on a GameCube on a CRT. I think that is the most gorgeous way to see this game. But art aside, the music is amazing. Like the ambiance is amazing. It's frightening. The gameplay is super good and tight. The story is really intriguing and good. I really love the world building in this game. It's a game that doesn't really have tutorials. They just kind of throw you in the mansion, and there's like a very brief cutscene in the beginning, and then you just kind of go around and you learn about what's happening through reading documents and kind of, you know, finding dead bodies, and you can kind of see what your character's thinking about these dead bodies. And, you know, in that way, I think it really gives the player a lot of agency, and it really puts the player in the world, versus I think a lot of modern storytelling where it's like that the game designers sometimes feel like they're yelling at you what's going on. This game is very much showing you what's going on, and I love that about it. Also, the controls, I feel like this game was kind of the swan song for tank controls. I think it was the best that tank controls had ever been done, implementing things like the quick turnaround, and like you can fine-tune auto aim and how that works from within the controls. There were lots of alternate control settings, but I stand by tank controls. I think they add a lot to the suspense. I think they make you, as a player, feel the horror that you would be feeling if you were the player in that world, right? So you're a human in a world where zombies don't exist, and there's a zombie coming around the corner, and yeah, you're a cop, but there's just that immediate like, oh my God, what is happening? And so you're kind of fumbling for your gun, you're fumbling for your bullets, you are in a foreign space and you don't know the lay of the land, where the doors are, right? You've never been in this building before. And I feel like tank controls perfectly communicate that kind of feeling, and it translates it down to the player level. And so it's, I think, the scariest survival horror game that I've ever played. Especially when I played it when it first came out and I was a little bit younger and I would play it in the dark. There were parts that I literally had to stop playing because I was so scared. So I could go on and on about this game. It's definitely my favorite Resident Evil game, and it's number 10 in my top 10. Wait, no, I lied, and it's number 9 in my top 10. All right, so coming in at number 8 for me is Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. So this game is a game that I think is on this list. I don't want to say primarily, but probably primarily for nostalgia. This game was huge for me as a kid. I had so much fun playing this game. I was really drawn into the world and the story and the gameplay. I grew up loving Sonic, playing Sonic on the Genesis, and finally playing Sonic in 3D. This was my first 3D Sonic game, so I skipped over Adventure 1 and I played this. It just absolutely blew my mind. It was so cool. The music was so good. I think the music has stood the test of time, even though it's incredibly cheesy. I think everybody still loves it. It's become very memey, but I think that says a lot about it, right? It's just really fun music. And it's hard. It's a really hard game. I think a lot of the challenges are going to take you hours and hours and hours to complete. I think for the average player, there is that goal of getting all of the emblems so that you can unlock a Green Hill Zone, and it's super hard to do. I still haven't done it, and I've been playing this game for like 20 years. And so there's this core game that I think is really, really great. There's some fun multiplayer stuff on the GameCube version. And then there's the game within a game, which is the Chow Garden, which is just so much fun. And I think everyone who plays this game thinks back upon the Chow Garden with a ton of fondness. There were so many different chows to collect, so many cool items to get for your chows. They were super cute and fun. You could, connect to the Game Boy Advance and try to get special chows. You could link up with save files on your memory card to other save games and get special chows that way. There were just so many cool things you could do with the Chow Garden. I think it was super ahead of its time. And there was a grinding nature of it too. So it kind of had this weird kind of pseudo RPG element where you're going out and you're playing missions and you're collecting, animals to upgrade your chow, and you're collecting those little vials which would boost your stats for your chow, and you're going out and doing a mission and then leveling up your chow, and going out and doing another mission and leveling up your chow. So there's this kind of like mini RPG within this Sonic game, and I genuinely feel like Chow Garden could be its own game. The music in the Chow Garden is really amazing as well. But primarily, I will say it's big on the nostalgia for me, but I couldn't not include this game. I think, that's one of those things. Again, talking about my points earlier in the video, the replayability, so much replayability. It's definitely a desert island game for me. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, and it warms my soul whenever I hear that music or see those graphics or hear people talking about it. So that's what puts it at number 8 on my list. All right, so coming in at number 7 is another game that I think is kind of like a dark horse game, and I think a lot of you probably aren't expecting it. And it's a game by Atlas, and it's a game that came out on the 3DS in 2019. It's the newest game on my top 10 list, and that game is Etrian Odyssey Nexus. So if you're a viewer of the channel, it's probably really obvious to you, because I talk about the series all the time. I'm a huge fan of the Etrian Odyssey series. I think it's the greatest dungeon crawling series of all time, and I think this game is the best entry in that dungeon crawling series. I love dungeon crawlers, and I think no one has done it as perfectly as Atlas did in Etrian Odyssey Nexus. There are a huge number of classes to choose from. There are a huge number of gorgeous pieces of character art that you can use to customize your characters. The skill trees are gigantic. They're huge and really overwhelming, but in the best way. You will be building out a skill tree and building out a party combination, and then, coming up with a new strategy and reassigning your stats and grinding them up and trying new abilities and new strategies. It's so much fun from a gameplay mechanic. I think of any turn-based role-playing game I've ever played, the battle system in the Etrian Odyssey series, but specifically Etrian Odyssey Nexus, is just by far, it just blows any other turn-based RPG out of the water. And I would argue that one to death. I think the only thing that really comes close is the Bravely Default series, just in terms of complexity. But Etrian Odyssey, I think, is truly better. I also love that the game, again, it's one of those games that it gives the player autonomy. You just jump in the game and you start playing the game and you figure it out as you go, and you're making maps and exploring the dungeon, and there's no really overwhelming tutorial. There's none of that Bravely Default, just horrible dialogue that you have to just mash through. You're hitting the A button and you don't really care. You just want to play the damn game already. Like, Etrian Odyssey respects the player. And honestly, I would fundamentally disagree with what people say in terms of the game not having story. I think the game has whatever story you want to impart on it. So there's kind of like this D&D element to it where you're exploring the dungeon and your characters will stumble upon some loose soil in the ground and this text bubble pops up, and it's very D&D. Like, the game is the dungeon master, and it'll say, you know, your party was walking through like the hot lush forest when you stumbled upon this loose soil in the ground, and so in your party took note of it. Would you like to poke the loose soil with a stick? Would you like to take a shovel and dig it up? Would you like to ignore it and move on? And you will choose an action, and then that action will have a consequence, and then that becomes your story. Like, just like Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of times something funny will happen. Like, maybe there's like a giant insect enemy that comes out and attacks people. Maybe there's some treasure. Maybe there's a lost item that someone in town, you know, is looking for you to find, and then you bring it back to them and talk to them about it, and it was like their little brothers or something. It really is a beautiful experience that lets you create your own journey and create your own story, which I think synergizes beautifully with the fact that it's a highly customizable RPG that's based upon you coming up with your own strategy from this huge number of classes that are oftentimes really unorthodox classes, like, you know, a class that specializes in dishing out different types of miasma that cause status effects, right? It's not just the typical mage, paladin, archer. The classes are super, super unique and interesting. That's the gameplay stuff. But I have to also say the soundtrack, which is by Yuzo Koshiro of Streets of Rage fame, is probably my favorite soundtrack of all time. If not, it's definitely in my top 3. The Etrian Odyssey music throughout the entire series is amazing, and it's all on Spotify and streaming services too, so if you want to check it out, I'd highly recommend it. It's the best relaxing, chill music. The town themes in this game are the best. They're the best town themes ever. Like, he is just, it's really great to see a composer who's been composing for so many years, and in my opinion, I think still doing his best work. Like, I think the Etrian Odyssey music is his best work. Streets of Rage was really groundbreaking, but I think this music is like freaking, it kills it. It's so good. The artwork's amazing, the music's amazing, the graphics are good, the gameplay is the best in its class, and the game is freaking hard. It's hard. It's an RPG that every battle counts. You cannot go through this game and use the auto battle feature for multiple fights in a row. Like, you will get crushed. You can't just mash on the A button. You will get crushed. You need to think about every situation. And I think that is the most beautiful salve for this genre, which has become so boring and grindy, right? Because if you think about some of these old games where, you know, the enemies are boring and they do the same thing every time, but you just need to grind up EXP because the boss is hard, but you're going through these hundreds or thousands of boring battles to get there. You know, a lot of people argued, hey, that's bad game design, that's boring, so we want to play action RPGs, and I think this is a great kind of counter argument to that. And, you know, the designers here are kind of saying, rather than make it an action RPG and totally change, you know, the gameplay style, what if we made every piece of combat meaningful? And that's what Etrian Odyssey does, and I think, you know, it knocks it out of the park. So I could go on and on about this game forever as well. I love it so much, and I love the whole series, but I wanted to include this one because I think it has the most classes and the most features of all the ones in the series. And so it totally deserves number 7 on my list, maybe even higher, but right now I'm giving it number 7. So that's Etrian Odyssey Nexus. All right, here is another one, my number 6 game that I think nobody, unless you personally know me and grew up with me, I think would ever guess, because I don't really talk about this game much on the channel. And that game is a game by Blizzard, and it's probably, of all the Blizzard games, I think, save for 1 or 2 exceptions, probably not the one you're guessing, and that is Warcraft III. And as you can see here, I bought the battle chest at Best Buy for $40 back in the day. I think I got it at Costco. I think my grandma bought it for me. And this game has given me so many hours of fun and enjoyment with friends. Growing up and playing it a ton with my friends and chatting, being in like a group chat on the phone. This was like before Skype or Discord chat was really good. We would do a group phone call and we would all talk. And we would play all the different custom games. You know, the custom games in this were amazing. As many of you know, went on to spawn other games like Defense of the Ancients. And essentially this game kind of invented arguably the tower defense genre or subgenre of like real-time strategy games. But you could go, like every night, you could pop on the custom game server and you could pick a new game from the list, something you've never heard before. There was Spellcraft, and there was Cube D, and there was, of course, Defense of the Ancients, and there was Risk. Risk was a ton of fun. All kinds of different games, and you could always pick something new. And some of them were really bad, like these weird Pokemon games, and people would drop in their own really janky 3D models, and it was really goofy, but it was always there was always something new to play, and it was just so addicting and so fun. And I think rather than, you know, I think playing something like StarCraft that's on the opposite end of the spectrum, that's like super hyper competitive, and the game has a series of parameters and you have to get really good at these parameters or the game is essentially not worth playing. I think Warcraft 3 took a really different approach, and since you can grind and you can level up characters, it opens this other window of opportunity for people who want to play a different style of game that's more based on the time you invest in it rather than your Twitch reflexes or your skills, or really just the hours you've spent watching strategy videos and reading guides and all things like that. So I think it's a much more accessible game. The music is really good. The graphics are really great at the time. The sound clips, the audio, the little things characters would say to each other, really fun. So many different spells and abilities in this game. Again, just the RPG mechanics were super fun, grinding creeps to level up your hero. But really, at the end of the day, this game comes down to the fun you would have with friends and the fun you could have with yourself, experimenting and exploring the ecosystem that Blizzard created with custom games. So that is Warcraft 3, which is my number 6 on this list. Okay, so coming in at number 5 on my list is a game that I don't have a physical copy of. It's the only one on this list I don't have a physical copy of, and that's because I have it for the PC. And it's also a game that you're probably not expecting because I don't talk about it that much on the show, but I'm a huge fan of this game, and that game is Minecraft. And I've been playing Minecraft since the very, very, very early versions, I think back in like 2010, 2011, when it was still in beta. And I would play, again, actually with a lot of the same people I played Warcraft 3 with. And before I go into like all the fun I had with my friends and all the good times on voice chat and this and that, running our own private vanilla server that we would play in survival mode, let me dial back and say, growing up, I was obsessed with Legos and obsessed with building things. I built a tree house and I built Legos and I built model kits, and I loved building stuff. I loved the freedom of creativity, of making your own thing, like decorating a set piece and all of that. And Minecraft was the perfect combination of RPG grinding to acquire materials to do that, and then having the freedom to actually do that and explore your creativity. And then the fact that it's this online based thing where you can play with all of your friends, and your friend can build a house and you can build a house and you can go on a quest together and then come back and make your castle bigger, it was so much fun. Again, like I was saying, so many late nights playing this game for like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours with my friends. Like right after we all graduated from college and we didn't really have much else to do. We didn't really have jobs yet. We just had so much fun playing this game. And I don't know, just the atmosphere. I know a lot of people really love, custom games and all the interesting things you can do with that. People like playing on creative mode. But for me, it was all about the vanilla experience, the original soundtrack, which I think is one of the greatest soundtracks of all time, especially in terms of ambient music that's in video games. It's just like a genius soundtrack. And just the freedom that this game gives the player. It's fun, it's exciting, it's terrifying too. Like the survival horror kind of aspect of it when you're in a dark cave and you've got no health and you hear like a creeper or you hear some enemy rushing up behind you and you freak out and you're screaming because you're gonna lose all your stuff. It's just so much fun. It was just a perfect online experience to play with my friends back in the day, and I love it dearly, and that's why Minecraft gets number 5 on my list.